What's going on, everyone? This is Ryan with Automatic Comics. And I know I have another card thing on here today, but I am not just going to be talking about cards. I'm going to be talking about comics as well. Basically, what I want to talk about in this video is, does CGC really need to just completely rethink how they approach grading? Because I am starting to think that they do. But we'll get into that in a little bit. We're going to talk about what's going on right here. And this is really the reason I decided to make this video. Is I wasn't going to make anything about this Pokemon card stuff. But as I was thinking about it more, it made me start thinking about kind of some underlying issues that I'm seeing, and decided to talk about it here. So CGC put out this statement on the 31st of January. It says CGC statement on Pokemon prototype and playtest cards. So first, if you're not aware, basically CGC seems to have certified what appear to be a large number of not authentic cards, around 1,500 or so, worth millions of dollars. So not a small deal, pretty big deal. So what they say here is CGC is aware of recent reports questioning the authenticity of certain Pokemon prototype and playtest cards. We take these claims very seriously and are conducting a comprehensive investigation. The cards in question represent less than 0.03% of the cards graded by CGC. We stand behind every card that we grade, and we are committed to addressing this matter thoroughly and professionally. This investigation will take some time, but we will provide updates as they are available. Now, I want to say, this whole statement, if you have been, watching whatever CGC and comics and all that for the last couple of years, this all will sound very, very familiar. The layout of this whole statement is very similar to the comic swapgate situation that happened, where the person was swapping comics out, sending them back into CGC, getting the reholdered, all that kind of thing. And something that looks very, very similar to that, keep scrolling down here. Hey, look at that. A big, long list of cert numbers from people that got these graded, or whoever got these graded. And the thing that's crazy about this, I mean, look at how sequential these numbers are. Now, I don't know about, I'm not an expert on the graded cards, but I'm guessing that the CGC graded cards work in a very similar way to CGC graded comics, in that they use these sequential type numbers for submissions. So it really looks like, it's the same submissions that, like, look at this one, like starting at this number here, 1 through, keep going, 27, 28, 29, 30, 40, 50, 70, 80. I mean, that's all one submission, 81 cards. Like, do you start going to that person that submitted them? Are they the ones that are responsible for this? I don't know, but like, that stuff is crazy when you see that many sequential cards for this. But this is, look at how slowly this is moving over here on the right. This is a ton of cards, a ton of cards. Like I said, it's, I think, approximately 1,500 cards that are in question. So it's a big deal. And these are not cheap. Some of these are like tens of thousands of dollars for a single card. And so this is a big, serious situation, but really it's very, very similar to what happened with the swapping, because you can see instructions for submitting an eligible card for review. So basically they're requesting that you send the cards back to them so they can reevaluate them. There's nothing in here about payment. So I'm sure the card collecting community is going to have the same questions and concerns as the comic collecting community had, that if they sent them in, what's going to happen with that item? Are they going to get paid out? How are they going to determine values? All that kind of stuff. So again, it's going to be, I'm sure, a big deal here for this. Now, I know that cards aren't comics, but to me, this is all under the same umbrella. It comes across as like a company culture type thing at this point, where we're constantly seeing similar problems. And I'll say, it's like over the last couple years, it's just been, feels like problem after problem. And before that, I know CGC wasn't perfect or anything like that, but I generally feel like we didn't really talk about them all that much. There's always the people that are like, oh, grading is a scam, and you always get that kind of thing. But generally, you send your books into CGC, they grade them, you get them back, and it's more or less done. Like, sometimes things get damaged in shipping, sometimes they might damage a book while they're grading it. Like, there's all that kind of stuff, but not like this. And I think it all feels like it kicked off right around Acetate Gate. If you all remember that one, where you had that Ultimate Fallout 4 variant, basically that had like some plastic stapled onto the top of it. And CGC gave it a blue label. They gave it a universal label, even though it was a modified book. And so eventually they did change and they decided to give it a green label, but I feel like it kind of started there. Then we had the swapped books. That was like the big scandal, kind of late 2023. Then we had the books stolen by employees. Then we had the shift in 9.9 grading. Then we had Ben Gate or Banana Gate. Then we had removal of controversial topics on the forums. So like people that had issues or complaining about things, like the forums was one of the big places where people would troubleshoot and find all these kinds of problems. Just a lot of those were removed or deleted, or they get cleaned up or removed very quickly. Then issues on the site, grade dates removed, grading notes disappearing. They've come back, but they disappeared for a while and we didn't hear anything about it. And now we've got this with certifying cards that were fakes. And so it's just been, it's been issue after issue pretty consistently. And it really should be that you don't really hear much from a company that, a grading company. It's just like you send it in, they do their job, they send the book back. Same thing with the cards. You send your cards in, they do their job, they send it back. Shouldn't really hear anything. They make their money, whatever, like who cares? But we shouldn't be hearing about all these kinds of problems going on. So I see a couple issues here. So, this is just one of the things I was thinking about. Is it just a problem with the way that CGC is doing business right now and the approach that they're taking to grading? So the first big thing I'm looking at is that grading really is all about trust. You are sending your books or your cards or whatever to a company. They are grading that item. You have a lot of faith in them because this is your personal item. You're sending it off to them. You want them to take care of it, not damage it, all that kind of thing. And the people that are then going to ultimately, because a big reason for doing that is people will sell those items. The person on the other end of that's purchasing it needs to trust that what they're buying is what it is, because they can't open that item. They're trusting that's what's in that case is what it is. They cannot look at it closely, handle it like they could if the item wasn't graded. And so they have just been eroding that trust for the last couple years with all these different problems. And they've got a big competitor coming up on the horizon with PSA in comics. Obviously PSA is already out there and they're the big dog in cards, but they have a big competitor coming up in comics. And, like you keep eroding that trust. Does that end up sending people over there? I don't know. We'll see. But first thought was, how do they regain that trust? To me, like the big thing is, like I said, like we just shouldn't hear anything. You got to get back to the basics on grading. Provide a big part of that, I think, is providing detailed graders notes for all books. This is where I'm focusing on comics again. Detailed graders notes for all books. And I think that if they have to charge us more to do that, so be it. And I know every time I've said that, I get people complaining like, oh, I'm paying, they should be doing this anyway. No, this is a business. They've got to make money or they're not going to do it. If it takes them more time to grade, to enter in those notes as they're doing it, especially if they're more detailed, fine, charge more for it. If that's what you have to do to make the same amount of money, we're grading less books because it takes more time to grade them, I don't care. Like put that type of information in there, make it very clear, very detailed, very transparent. It's something people have been asking for forever. I don't understand why you don't do that. It seems like a very simple thing. And if you have to charge more to do it, do it. The next thing to me is new case designs. This is one of those things where they should be showing that they're actually improving and innovating. And I feel like they've been sitting on their hands for years, like no UV protection, no enhanced security measures. Like they had all these problems before. And like, it seems like maybe they've done some things. People have said the cases are maybe a little harder to crack now, but still, like make something that it's clear that this is protecting people when they have an item that's graded. And the UV protection, we know PSA is going to be doing that. Like, why aren't you doing that? Put stuff in there that actually is an improvement. I don't understand why those types of modifications and changes haven't been done already, but at minimum should be being talked about to do moving forward. Last thing on regaining trust, I feel like, is being open with the issues. Deleting all that stuff on the forums is the exact opposite of that. It basically goes like, we don't want to hear from you. We don't want to know about the problems. We don't want you talking about the problems. Now I get it. It's their site. So they probably like, they're thinking like, we don't want negative press coming from our own site. But again, it's like, to me, it's a bad look. And it's also just about like when we had the notes that disappeared and the grade date that disappeared, we didn't hear anything. We didn't hear anything. Like we hear like from, like the grapevine, it's like, oh, they're working on fixing it. It's like, but put out some type of release, say like, this was not intentional. This was, something that happened during the software update and we're working on fixing it. Yeah, it's been fixed now, but everything just was never told to the community out there. Like, just be clear about this stuff. I don't understand why you don't do that. Because like I said, again, CGC is a grading company. It is all about trust. And if you are acting all secretive and hiding things and everything, like that does not send out the vibe of trust. Now, the other big issue I see right now, and this comes with what happened with these graded Pokemon cards, is I feel like CGC seems to trust the people that send them items too much. And what I mean by that is when I watch people do like PSA returns, there are tons of times where I see PSA returns where PSA goes, we are not going to grade this card. For whatever reason it might be, either they don't think that they can authenticate it, or there's something that seems off about the card, or whatever. They will send cards back to people that are not graded with, like in a little sleeve or whatever. And people always get upset about it. They're like, oh, I opened this out of a pack. Well, it's like, I mean, I don't care. Like to me, what it means is PSA is at least looking at it. And if there's something that is of question to them, they're just not going to grade it. I don't feel like that happens at CGC. There are very few things that it comes across that CGC will not grade. The only one that I really know of is Eerie #1. It's this old kind of like horror magazine from Warren. And it's one of these ones that's like on like basically paper that anybody could pretty much print off on their home printer or something, And so those, they do not validate. But pretty much everything else they seem to. And one of the things I'm going to talk or going to point out here is this book right here. So we've got Gobbledygook #1 and #2. So if you're not familiar with this, the back cover of this is actually the first time that you have the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles on like a cover in print. And so that's what makes this one so valuable. CGC will only validate this if Kevin Eastman looks at the book and says it's real. Personally, I don't think they should grade any of these. And the reason I'm saying this is because of what we saw with these Pokemon cards. And I may pronounce this name wrong. I apologize. But this is an article that was put out on this. It says, last year, hundreds of prototype Pokemon cards began to sell in the collecting circles from the personal collection of Takumi Akabane, one of the original creators of the Pokemon TCG. He worked at Creatures until 2008. He recently attended events to sign some of the cards. Grading company CGC worked closely with Akabane to verify the card's authenticity. So this to me tells me CGC could not verify these cards on their own. They had to go to someone else to verify those cards. And clearly that was wrong, or pretty clearly that was wrong. And so that's just where people are questioning. It's like, did this person fake them? Was it to make, for their own financial gain? Like, this is what I'm talking about with blindly trusting people, it seems. If CGC cannot verify the item on their own by, looking at that item through whatever techniques they have, they should not grade it. They should send it back. And this seems like this case is where they rely on an expert that is supposed to know about these. Same thing with Gobbledygook 1 and 2. They're relying on an expert that is supposed to know one of these or know what these are. And I'm starting to think they shouldn't. Like if they cannot validate it by themselves, they should not be grading these items. Some other points I'm going to point out with that was my Superman #2 that I got graded. I had it conserved. I had some leaf casting done and everything. And the first time I sent it in, I did have like a note on it, and I'm just wondering if it fell off or something like that or what, but I had a note on it that said, this is a married cover. When it was sent back to me, they did not note that it was a married cover. They just assumed it was the original cover. or from the same book, and it wasn't. I had to send it back into them again to get them to put the married cover note on it. I mean, they're relying on the submitter to be honest. And when you're talking about items that are thousands of dollars, where people make hundreds, thousands, millions of dollars off selling these things, you cannot assume that somebody is being honest. We've clearly seen that there are scammers out there all over the place, and people are relying on them to be one of the authorities for determining that these items are what they say they are. And if they can't validate that something is legitimately, what it is, they shouldn't grade it. They should send it back. Maybe they should have sent back my Superman 2 and said, sorry, we can't grade this. But they don't. They grade them. And another one I'm going to point out where you see this is books with split spines, where there's paper loss at the staples. Sometimes you have split spines and you can see that the staples line up with where that paper loss was that you can tell was the staple. But I've seen plenty of times where there's so much paper loss at the spine that you can't actually see that cover really does go with that book. Meaning it could have been a married cover, and then they just give it a universal label because they trust that the person sent it in, that is not trying to lie and cheat. You just can't do that. I mean, honestly, like, I'm starting to think like I'd like to see CGC rejecting more books. Like that needs to be part of their process, and I feel like it's not. And that's one of the ways that that I feel like they could ultimately regain some of that trust. And yeah, it's going to piss some people off because then they can't get their book graded. But if that is what it is, if that's what we have to do to get back to where, we aren't having fake collectibles getting graded and authenticated, especially high dollar items, because that's where it's going to happen. It's going to be with the high dollar items. Then, I mean, it's just going to continue to erode that trust. But yeah, this was something that was just, I don't know. I felt like it was an interesting topic. If you want to know more, if you want to look into more on the Pokemon stuff, there are articles out there about it. Basically, the way that they found that these weren't real is there is a forensic technique that apparently is used. This isn't something that's openly shared. Like when you read into these articles, it's not openly shared. People have to kind of like crack the code themselves, but there are some that are known where there are certain printers that will have these little dots that are put onto the items that they print. And those dots correspond with kind of like codes that can be used to determine the date when that thing was printed and the printer that was used. And a bunch of these cards, these play test cards that were identified as potentially as fakes, look to have a code from 2024 when these were supposed to have been printed in 1996. And so that's the problem. And one of the cards that they showed was even one that was signed. I think it was this one here. Yeah, signed by Takumi Akabane. So it's like this was shown to be a fake. He even signed it. So it's like, how is he ever proving that that's real? Like, to me, that is a really, really bad look. But yeah, I mean, I'm tired of hearing about scandals. I don't want to hear about this stuff. Like, I don't want this. I mean, if it happens, I want to hear about it, but we shouldn't have to hear about all this going on all the time. Like, it's just, it's getting to be a lot. So let me know in the comments what you think. I'm sure I'm going to get all the gradings of scam stuff, whatever, but see you on the next one.